Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, so we're going to begin our program. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I'd like to welcome our speaker this evening, Sam Kaufman, who is the Fond du Lac County Executive. During this presentation, he will update us on both current and future matters regarding Fond du Lac County. Kaufman was previously elected to the County Board of Supervisors and held various leadership roles and was selected to serve as the first vice chair of the Board of Supervisors and was chair of the UW Extension, Agriculture, and Recreation Committee. In addition, he has served as vice president of the Fond du Lac County Towns Association. He was elected Fond du Lac County Executive in a special election, which I know you all voted in 2022, following the death of Alan Beagle. Previous to this position, Kaufman was a trial attorney and partner in the law firm of Van de Zandy and Kaufman, LLP. He earned a Juris Doctor in 1994. And so Sam will present to us, and then when he's ready, he'll take questions after the presentation. So when it's time for questions, just raise your hand, and if you could repeat the question, so because the public at home can hear through the microphone.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be here to speak to Ripon itself. I've been trying to make my way around to the different municipalities to talk to them since I've been elected county executive. I would know Marty Furrow is here, our former chairman of the county board. I joke that I had actually replaced Marty as the chairman for about a month and a half, and they kicked me out of the county board meeting county exec. So, but it's an honor to have Marty and to serve with him in the county board for a number of years, and just have his leadership there on the county board level for it too. Yeah, as most people know, Alan Beagle passed away last year. Many of us had worked with him on the county board. It was an honor to work with Alan. He served for about 27, 28 years as county executive. I believe he's the second longest county executive in the country.
The longest.
Yes, okay. I know Marty had looked into that at one point also. I think there's somebody in California who I thought was a little longer.
Oh, no. Well, in Wisconsin, he's the longest.
Oh, yes, in Wisconsin, he is the longest, certainly, for it. But yeah, quite a period of time he had served. And it was an honor to work with him, both on the county board level and personally in his campaign. But, times we moved on, obviously. We're still going through that adjustment period. The election was last year in June. I had the honor of serving then to succeed Alan at that point. So this is where we're at right now. Essentially, when I came to office in June of last year, what I was looking for is basically at that point a continuation as to what Alan was doing at that point. As chairman, at least for that period, I had a chance to work with a few different individuals on the staff of the administration. Our interim executive at that point was Aaron Jarrett. I worked with Aaron as chairman to go through different areas that the county was working on, so I can see where we could help itself. When I came to office, some of the things we focused on at that point, from my perspective, was a restructuring at that point. One of the things I'd seen as county executive when I came in, and also when I was on the county board, was there was various departments that I felt very strongly needed to restructure. Give you an idea, one example is our dispatch department itself. Marty even knows the different issues we'd have with regard to hiring individuals, retaining them, training issues we had. And when I took a look at their department, one of the things I did is basically broke it down to determine where's the core of the problems that we're experiencing with it, and then we had a change of leadership in dispatch, and I was fortunate enough to hire Amy Hazy, who was the emergency management director from Dodge County, over. But part of that restructuring required me to go through and create what I felt was lacking was a deputy position. Somebody that can be there to take care of 911 communication plus emergency management. So this way, when one was working on one area in the event of emergency, I still had somebody in charge of the other area with it. That created, I felt, a strong stability to the department. We had at one point reached the level, I think, of about 15 people that were dispatchers. With it, we actually have room for 27. So we felt that we were in a crisis mode with regard to how many we had. We had mandatory overtime going on with regard to our dispatchers. At this point, as of today, we have 21. There's no longer mandatory overtime for those dispatchers. With it, we have now moved to a supervisor shift system itself. So it's actually very well, morale has jumped quite a bit with it, and then we restructured the office space itself down there. So it's been a great positive movement for them to get them moving forward. And Jeff Corbin is our deputy director now, years of experience with that department, and now between him and Amy, they've done a wonderful job with it. But there's other departments we've had to work on. So one is DSS, Department of Social Services, and Department of Community Programs. One of the things about those two departments is you'll find, what I found, there's a duplication of services that are going on between the two. And a lot of that has to do with the communication issue. So you can have one person who's receiving services from both, but they can't communicate because of HIPAA regulations between the two. And so what I was finding is because of that lack of communication, one didn't know what the other was doing with it. And I felt there was a strong inefficiency going on in those departments. So what I've done now is I continued the conversation. Alan went on through and was looking at a consolidation of both departments into one human services model. When I looked at that also, I felt very strongly that that had to be the direction that we had to take to do that. And so we started looking at the models used by other counties, including Washington County and Winnebago County. As we explored that further, I felt very strongly this was the best avenue to do that and to go through and consolidate those services into one. So we are now proceeding with regard to that. Supervisor Kat Griffith is here from the County Board too. She serves on our Human Services and Social Services Committee also. And so her committee will be looking at that consolidation as it moves forward. We have an ad hoc committee that's appointed right now to start the working group process of looking at the different positions now that we're going to do with that. But there's still some inherent problems that we have with regard to the system. One is our inpatient mental health facility, the acute unit. We have been struggling with that department. And unfortunately, twice since I've been in office, I've gotten to a point where I almost had to shut it down. The reason being, we don't have the staff. We are in competition right now with private industry in the medical field, and right now as it sits, we've not been able to compete with them financially. They're paying far greater than we are able to do at this point. But the problem is, what I'm seeing is more and more of these individuals, CNAs, LPNs, RNs, they're jumping around is what they're doing. They're going from one job, staying for a little while, and they say, well, it's greener on your side, and they'll take off and go to a different facility. And now here they quit that job and move over to a different location. The reality is they can do that now because it's the demand that's out there for it. So they go to the highest person who's willing to pay them. And then we have to switch now to traveling nurses, traveling CNA, traveling LPNs for it. And they're leaving the medical profession now at the regular place, hospitals and so forth, and they're moving around the country now with it into different short-term contracts. So it's a whole different avenue that's going on, and we have to figure out how to restructure that itself. And part of that has to be, first, the pay. The benefits is the other part of it. And the realization that today's younger individuals, that when they go through and they want to work, it's a whole different mentality now. They want flex time. They want work at home time. They want to be doing other things. They don't want to make it work their life with it. And that's what we've been trying to determine. How do we go through and make these changes? So as we go through the acute unit, trying to figure out how we restructure all of this, it's really working with our departments to figure out, okay, where are the gaps? Because I find it very interesting, the building that they are in right now also houses Harbor Haven, which is our senior citizen facility with regard to individuals there. What's interesting about that, Harbor Haven itself is not on our levy. And they are staffed, they are 24-hour service, they have an incredible staff of people, and they're well organized. We have not been able to maintain that model on the other side, and it's always bothered me to figure out how do we do this because of the fact that mental health cases are increasing, they're not decreasing. And we've been trying to figure out ways to deal with this for the future. We are one of the few counties in the state that actually have an inpatient mental health facility. We have ourselves, we have Trumbull County, the state has Mendota. In Madison, you've got the one in Winnebago also with it. Milwaukee County went private. They used to be a public facility, now they've gone private with it. So the hard part is if you take an individual, for example, that's in a surrounding county that doesn't have a facility, they want to come then and bring them over to Fond du Lac County with it. And of course, we have our own patients. We have a 25-bed system there at the acute unit, but we don't have the staff to do it. It got to a point where we were having 2 staff members on PM shifts, and there would be about 15 to 17 patients. It came to a point there was a liability issue for me, the fact that I was now exposing not only patients but our staff to injury with it. I did not want to take the risk that if I had a person on staff there trying to handle so many patients and something happened itself to either them or the patient, that obviously the county would be facing a lawsuit because of it. We had to figure out a different answer. So the first thing I did is I imposed a ratio of 5-to-1. So for every staff member, we were only allowed to have 5 patients, and that was it. I gave priority to Fond du Lac County residents first. If we had beds available after that, up to 15 max, we would then go ahead and bring on an out-of-county person. Now, part of the issue when it comes to the inpatient facility, why a lot of people won't deal with them or want to build them, has to do with funding. Obamacare, when they went through and they passed the regulations requiring health insurance, that actually created a more negative effect on the facilities. Because what happens for funding is, if you go on through and a county sends a patient over that does not have insurance, the county pays 100% then of that fee. If you have insurance, then you're stuck then with the contract price with the insurance. So for example, what's happening is if we charge $1,400 a day and the county sends them over with no insurance, the county will pay the $1,400 then. If it's an insurance and their contract is $800, we're only going to receive $800 then for it. And that's where we start taking the loss, because when Obamacare came in, it required everybody to have insurance. So as those insurances came in, it reduced the revenue that we were receiving there. The problem with that is we're now trying to figure out how to pay our doctors. We're now demanding anywhere from $300,000 to $400,000. And when we go through and start talking to recruiters, those very doctors now want $50,000 to $100,000 sign-on bonuses just to get them on there for it. It has been a battle statewide for facilities and private hospitals to get psychiatric doctors on staff. SSM has now had a group of those retire. And what's happening is now some of these doctors, they're moonlighting. So they'll work for one facility, get paid their salary, but then they're turning around and then working at another facility at the same time part-time. And they're drawing in salaries that pay another $100,000 to $200,000. We had a doctor on staff with us in the county when I started looking at it. He basically making about $1 million a year because he was moonlighting for it. As long as he was doing his job, the unfortunate part was we're stuck. Is that we had to still let him do it, otherwise we took the risk that we were going to lose him as a physician itself. So currently, our medical director has now retired. We have 2 doctors on staff for the acute unit. We have not been able to find another doctor to come on staff for it. Our CNAs right now, we're down about 15 right now, CNAs. Our LPNs, we're down probably about 10. Our RNs, we are staffed. We're not short on them. But the problem is that it's the CNAs that we need, because the RNs basically want to work a day shift. And we're in a situation now, because of the market as it is, if you try and go through to force them to work a 3rd shift, they will quit. And they'll just simply go someplace else because they know they can get it and go somewhere else. So that's the dynamics of where we're at right now with our system. So I've been trying to find ways to work around it. And one of the things I've been trying to do is change their practice and policies. When I came with DSS, I did a restructuring there. I went through after Pat Lancor had retired. I went through and Rick Edmer was our deputy director. He retired. This was the opportunity for me now to start looking at restructuring our departments. How do we go through DSS to make sure that they're following all proper practices and policies? So what I did is I brought in a professional from UW Green Bay. She completed a complete review now of the policies and practices of that department. The report that came out from her showed me a series of policy updates that need to be made, that now are being made. Practices that have gone through with regard to how social workers are applying these policies have now been noted now with recommended changes. So we're in the process of doing that also. The reason why this is important and why now I'm going to be looking for somebody to do the same thing with the acute unit is if you're going to consolidate 2 departments into one, I cannot bring 2 problems into one there. So I need to resolve this issue ahead of time so we are consolidating one system that's going to be efficient with it. So going back to the positions, pay. We have not been able to compete. As county executive, what I have is a pay grade steps where it tells me that where you start and where your high number is. In order to be hired, you work within that avenue right there. What was happening was department heads would get a hold of me and say, I have so-and-so that would like to work here. But in order to get them, they want this. They're telling us what they want for a salary because they now have 3 or 4 other job offers that have now offered them that. When I look at the comparison to give that amount, it's pushing me now to the higher levels of steps that we have. And that appears to be more of the starting pay now with it. So we've been forced to go through and trying to figure out where's the balance, how do I pay them to keep them here or to get them hired? Because retention is also an issue now. So one of the things I finally came through and did is I directed a wage study to be completed. We have not done that now in 23 years. So that is in the process right now. We've gone through and we've hired a company called Bolton & Associates out of Ohio. They're in the process right now of starting that. We've just rewritten the job descriptions for our positions, many of which we didn't even have written for with it. And so now we've gone through, we're writing those, they're all going to be completed. They're now being submitted to Bolton. Bolton will then have his wage study completed and supplied to me by August. I need to have that completed for the budget for 2024. So I can figure out how to incorporate any wage adjustments into 2024's budget. But here's the reality of it. When that number comes in, I then have to look at that and determine how do we implement it? Do we have the money to do that? Winnebago County just completed theirs and they have about a $2 to $3 million adjustment that they have to make for theirs. We have sales tax, obviously, but under the current rules of the county board, we are not allowed to use sales tax for wages for it. So that leaves us now what's left on the levy. We have to figure out now how do we go through and pay for any adjustments that we're going to make. When I look at this, am I going to have to implement it in two parts? There's the non-exempt employees and there's the exempt employees. Which one do I implement? Which I've already indicated I would more start with the non-exempt individuals for more the hourly people and that to try and adjust their incomes itself. My hope is I can adjust both at one time, but it's going to depend on what is available, what is the recommended amounts. Now, one of the things we're going to be looking at with the wage study is that there's a possibility we're going to have a compression issue with it. Years of service is probably the biggest area itself. And that's where the large number came in from Winnebago County. They're adjusting their wages based on years of service, which is to try and eliminate the compression issue. So if I take my chart and have a minimum and a high, and those numbers now adjust, if I bring people from outside the minimum or below it up into the minimum, now I've got a flood of people that may be in the minimum to the middle who have been there for 15, 20 years with it. To them, that's not going to be fair. The fact I've taken somebody that might be there for 2 years, put them in minimum, compared to somebody who's been there for 15 with it. That's part of what we're going to face. But if we don't have the money to make those adjustments, to do it, that's where we come into the problem. Because ultimately, it's up to the county board to decide if we're going to be able to implement it by coming up with the money. I will propose the changes in the budget for 24, but the county board ultimately is the one that has to go through and approve that itself. So that'll be part of the discussion we're going to have this year because we cannot put it off any longer. That is a priority to me for the future of our employees, not only to retain who we have, but to go through and be able to attract new talent into our county government itself. Because I need to preserve our services that we offer to our county residents, but I need the people to do that. And obviously I'm looking for the best people I can to fill these positions with it. So that is one of the areas that we are still working on right now with it. I've been still going department by department to figure out where I can go through and make things more efficient, to cut where I need to cut, where I think that there's waste with it. Give an example, you've probably heard Rolling Meadows Golf Course with it. You know, that is a topic I hit right away when I came on as county executive because part of the reason why, as chair of that committee, I saw those numbers constantly with it. We have accumulated about a $2.5 million debt with the golf course because what happens is they acquire debt, the county has to step on in and cover that debt. And so the county's accrued that much money in payment of their debt. You cannot operate a business that is set up as a private industry essentially, or as an enterprise fund. You can't do that. That's not the way to operate. They were averaging anywhere from $50,000 to $250,000 losses every year with it. You cannot do that. I wanted to make sure the public was aware of that, what was going on. I immediately had a committee meeting set up at Rolling Meadows Golf Course. We addressed the issue right away for it. I was fortunate enough that Chair Abel at that point was in agreement to appoint an ad hoc committee to review the matter. We had to make a hard decision. Do we keep the golf course or do we sell it? If we're going to keep it, what changes do we need to make it financially sound with it? And so I was fortunate enough to work with them on that, and they came back with recommendations, one of which is the restaurant we have there is actually leased with a private entity. They now are recommending that the county take that over. They looked at Washington County's model. Washington County owns their golf course, and their restaurant has a net profit of about $150,000 a year by operating themselves. And all they serve are brats, hot dogs, beer, and soda there with it. And so we have a restaurant that serves brats, burgers, and so forth that's probably leased then. That lease will end in 24. And that's what we have to decide at that point. Are we going to take it over, or are we going to go through and lease it out again? The other recommendation the committee has made is that we renovate the clubhouse. It's been my recommendation that we turn the clubhouse into basically a 365-year facility with it. I'm not looking for a wedding venue. I'm looking for a venue that we can bring things out to, like music events, for example. But there's a whole second floor of that building that's completely unused and wasted with it. And David Brandler, who does an amazing job out there as the golf course manager, and I've talked. We see the concept or the idea that we can create up there is an area where you can build an upper deck area on the outside. You can have music events going on that will overlook then the golf course. It's beautiful out there. We can actually go through and increase the different types of sales we have. Indoor sports or indoor golf itself in the winter months too, to create activities throughout the year with it. And the hope is, like I said, we had to look at is, do we build a new facility or do we renovate the existing clubhouse? And the push or recommendation is to renovate the existing clubhouse, which I'm in agreement with for it. The benefit to us is that when it comes to things like building a berm, which is going to be required, we have a highway department. We are one of the few highway departments in our state that have its own construction company itself. And so we have the ability to go through and to use then our highway department to help with some of that construction to save some of the costs that we have with it. But it's still going to fall short, we know, as far as revenue goes with it. So we've still been trying to figure out ways to change the system out there. One of the things I did in the background with Dave is we changed our accounting system. When I started looking at that, because as an attorney, I should do different accounting things too, tax returns, different things. And one of the things we started looking at their books was the way they were buying and selling things, equipment, for example. So what was happening was they would go through, even though they didn't have the money yet, they would make purchases of equipment. And I said, you can't do it that way because now you're running yourself into a deficit when you don't have the money to do it. So we changed that practice beginning last year, and the rule now is they can't make the purchase unless the money is available. When we started making the changes and looking at their books last year, I got the final number for 2023 in January, and now they turned a profit last year of about $40,000 on the golf course, and for the first time, no sales tax has been used to cover any of their debt for 2023 or 2022 with it. So we're on the right track, and based on what I'm seeing for this year, I think they have a good possibility that they can again exceed at least $50,000 to maybe $100,000 profit this year with it. The whole idea is to promote our golf course and try and hold more events and try and go through and cover different things or change different processes they've been using, which to me has contributed to the deficit that they've experienced out there. So I was very happy they kept the golf course. It is a beautiful place. There's a lot of history there at that golf course itself, and it was something I didn't want to lose, but from the financial aspect for the county, I can't allow the county to go through and continue to lose money like that. It's not a responsible way to do that to our taxpayers. So I'm glad they're right on track with that. But we still have a lot of changes we have to make with county government itself. Even the way we operate. One of the things I've done is when I came on in, I worked with Chair Abel when we made changes with regard to our committee some of the committee structures itself for it. I wanted to make sure that public comments, for example, I believe very strongly in freedom of speech. So when it came to when I was finding different committees, there was a disorganization as to how people were allowed to speak during the public comments section, where some committees were going through and not allowing people to speak in any way, which I felt very strongly they had every right to with it. And so what I did is I asked the county board, the committee on committees would call it, to then change the rule. And now we've made one uniform rule that applies to every single committee that allows any person to speak on items on the agenda for up to 3 minutes with it. That is a consistent rule every single chair has to follow of either a standing committee or a non-standing committee with it. This way to forge individuals in the public their opportunity to be there to speak with it and to guarantee that ability for it. So those are things I want you to change with regard to how we did things, because transparency to me is very important to county government. So people will always know at all times how we are functioning with it. And so what I started doing, for example, when I started doing policies, when I write policy now, I make sure that the supervisors get the policies I'm going to implement ahead of time. So this way it's transparent as to what I plan on implementing. So when they look at a resolution that's come to the county board, now they can say, here's the resolution, this is the policy the county executive will be implementing. They can review that policy, will make them fully informed to make a decision in regard to that resolution itself. And I think that's something they need to do. So they're fully informed. So when they talk to their constituents, they know exactly what the resolution says, and they know how the policy is going to be implemented with it. And plus it affords them the ability to give input in regard to the policies that the county executive is going to implement for it too. Marty knows too, and it's been very important to me, that relationship between the county executive and the county board is very important. I compare us quite often to Dodge County and Winnebago County, only because, give an example, our budget process. We went through our budget hearings, our budget resolution to approve it, I think lasted about 2 minutes for it to be approved. Winnebago County ended up, I heard they started in the morning, they didn't get done until late, and they had about 25 amendments they were arguing about. Dodge County turned around, theirs went on for a few days. It was a constant battle going on in committees and amendments going on because of different disagreements that they have with it. So Winnebago County now is actually looking at a restructuring of their committee system. They have now asked me to come and speak to their committee that's been appointed or created for this purpose. So I'm presenting to them already the manner in which we've restructured ours. When Marty was on, they used to 36 at one point. That went through, they went to 18, and then changed to 25 with it. But they did some committee restructuring itself, and I think we have a fantastic system now in Fond du Lac County itself, that it could be a model for a lot of counties that are out there. But the key is a relationship between county executive and the county board. I make them fully aware of things they're working on. I want their input with regard to it, because the whole idea is that when you work on something that's in the interest of the county, you want cooperation with them. And the idea is get ahead of the game, talk to them about the issue, get their input, so by the time you're ready to present it to them, now you have something they've already heard about and they've had input on. And then we can lessen the conversation later on it. And so it makes it easier that when we get done, we now have something we've worked on together and with something we accomplished together with it. So it's been a great relationship that we've had together with Chair Abel and myself, that he's been very on top of all this also. With it. We have 2 vice chairs also, Marty Ryan and Dean Will, we have a good relationship with also, and all the best interests of the county in mind itself. But what's the future of the county? Well, the future has to be growth for me. It has to be how do we go through and prepare the county for the next 20 years? And one of the issues we're facing right now is a worker shortage. That's one of the issues we have in the county. Most companies in the county are facing labor shortages right now. Fond du Lac County is no exception. We are short employees also. When I look at the statistics now coming out from the different companies in the county, every one of them are having difficulties finding people right now. And it's not only a matter of wages. Again, we're back to a whole different generation mindset now. I call them nomads. Is that this younger generation does not want to stay in one place, and my kids are no exception. I have a daughter that has moved. She's out down in South Carolina. My oldest son had moved to Arizona to go to school. He's back and I was talking to him again. He says, I don't want the winter. I don't want to bother. So, you know, it's what we're facing, is that we go through and try and talk to these younger individuals about working in the county. They don't want to guarantee anything. Their views, I don't know. Maybe I'll stay around, maybe I won't. So we're trying to find ways to get them to stay, to create new opportunities for them here. But it's hard when you've got a housing shortage going on, for example, for it. So we go through it, I keep hearing people say, yep, we need more housing, more housing. I agree 100%. And we look at different projects. Campbellsport is an example, for example. I worked with their village administrator. He's got multiple housing projects I think will be fantastic that they're looking at. And we're looking at ways to partner with them now. That municipality has a substantial investment they're putting in those projects, and we're willing to partner with them to help them get it done. By the time it gets done, it's going to be 300 or so different places there, houses and multifamily places. But I keep telling people, you can go through and have apartments, and that's fine. But ultimately, those families in the apartments want a house. And if you don't have a house available for them to buy, they're going to move out of the county. About a month ago or so, when I was talking to a realtor, we counted there was 46 houses available in the county. That was it for it. And so we're running into problems there because rentals are running anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 a month in a lot of places. And that exceeds the house payment now. But the market as it is right now, we're sitting at about a 7% rate in 30 years on that. People aren't gonna buy. There's a slump in mortgage lending right now going on. There's a low market with regard to houses available for it. And even to go through and have rental properties that are out there itself, you still gotta find decent housing with it. So what we've been pushing on as the county now with the finance committee is to find the projects that not only will create single family homes, but they have to be affordable. We are not looking for houses that are over $500,000, $400,000. If you want the younger generation to stay, you need a house that's going to be under $300,000 to make it work for them with it. And that's what we're trying to figure out. Where can we do that? The problem is space. That's the dilemma we run into. Town association, let me give an example of that. They meet quarterly. It's all the town association, that's the town chair of their board members. We meet every 3 months. Last time I was there, I talked to them with regard to housing. I said, we are looking for projects out in the townships, subdivision, anyone department, crickets. I used to be on the town board in Wapon, I can tell you why. They do not want to give up farmland. They are very adamant about the fact that they will not give up that farmland because they're already losing it to solar and wind. And they're not happy about it because they feel that very strongly prime farmland is being taken away from them with that lease. With it, a lot of farmers lease farmland, they don't own it. And that's what they're relying on. And because of that, there's a reluctance to get any type of cooperation from them to build these projects out in the township. One township I was talking to, I thought this is a good potential, and their town chairman said to me, we don't want the city here. If you want the city, go live in the city. This is the country, and this is where we want it to be quiet for it. We have another municipality now that has changed their setbacks and doubled them to keep out larger multifamily housing now for it. So that's the struggle we want. They want their small town living, and their attitude is, that's their problem. That's not my problem. This is our small community, this is where we want to live. But when you get into the inner cities, there's only so much space. So the cities have to make choices. Change your setbacks, reduce your lot sizes to make it work. If we're going to move into smaller home communities with it, oddly enough, a lot of those younger generations like those smaller homes with it. And so that's a project I know Winnebago County is working on right now, is a smaller home community with it. And if that's the future that municipalities want to go into, I'm okay with that. If it creates housing that will make younger individuals stay in the community, I'll support that approach with it. It gives that opportunity for us to do it. But there has to be projects that we're doing. I'm looking at one right now that I'm doing we call it the Aeronautical Park. It's about 46 lots, and it was probably there when you were there.
I was there when we found out the land was available for purchase.
Yes, and so one of the projects we're doing, it's been zoned, when we purchased that and did it, we created a commercial park out there. There's only been one lot sold in all these years. And the problem we run into is the roads that are out there. For a commercial site, it is not in Highway 41. You cannot get semis really in and out of there because the township doesn't want them on their town road for it. So you run into that issue. So one of the things I'm looking at doing now, these lots out there alone are about anywhere from 4 to 5 acres. Now I've started a discussion with the possibility of seeing whether or not we can go through, split those lots into smaller lot sizes to double, say 20, 25 lots out there, and then work with the developer to create new housing out in that area itself for it. So if we're not going to sell it commercially, then let's look at residential, because that's an area that's open to us that we already own. I've had a conversation with the town out there with it. They're very supportive of this idea to do it because it goes along with their long-term plans. If you look on the west side, it's all residential now out there in the town of Fond du Lac. So this goes hand in hand with their long-term plans for it. And they've already approached the idea if we do that, they are looking at different ideas with their town park they have to expand different ideas or different things they want to do. So that creates the environment that I feel strongly that younger individuals want. When I speak to them, parks is a big thing with it. I know Ward Gallagher is here, she's been part of the Park Watch group itself out there, but a lot of our families itself in Fond du Lac County have great memories of Hobbs Woods. I know I do with my kids. My wife and I taking our children out there, taking photos, just the hikes we've had, the great memories out there. And the parks are very important to me, and the idea we've been trying to do is promote. A lot of people don't even know that we have different parks. A lot of times I'll talk to different groups, I ask them about Shag and Empty. No one. Never heard of it. for it. At Hobbs Woods, oh yeah, they've all heard that one, but not Shaginappy. But we have some beautiful parks in our system that need to be highlighted and need to be promoted. Hiking trails, things we can do. You look at Riggs. A lot of people don't even know there's a fantastic hike out there at Riggs you can do, Riggs Park, with it. Because it's not something we as a county have been promoting with it. And if we can make people aware we have these things for you to do with it, that attracts families in because they want to see this type of environment that you're going to live in for it. And to me, it's a preservation of our park system itself. We have gone through now, and the county board has agreed to use ARPA money, which is part of the $20 million that the county had received, to start renovating different parks. So we've allocated right now close to $1 million to renovate various park projects that we're going to be doing. Now the benefit for us with our ARPA money itself is that because we have a highway department, I have the highway department doing a lot of the construction work. By have them do the construction work, ARPA regulations require us to use the money on the project. So what I'm able to do now is take that money, have the highway department do it, I pay the highway department the ARPA money, then the money is going to come right back into our general fund with it. So we now get the work done and we're capable of using the money again for different projects. So it's been a fantastic process with Tom Yankee, Terry Dietz from the park system, of different things we've been trying to do. One of the things we're doing out of Shaginappy, they just approved is ARPA money with regard to our shoreline. We've got different areas of problems we've had out there with regard to flooding, with the stream, that Pipe Creek stream that goes through there, and Shaginappy is one of the parks we're trying to highlight. One of the things I did when I looked at Shaginappy and toured it was there's an amphitheater there that I don't think a lot of people knew or realized usually there. It's beautiful. So they started looking at cleaning that up. There's the old Boy Scout lodge is there. We now start renovations to the lodge to clean that up itself. So we're trying to go through, make changes, and start promoting these. And when I say promotion, one of the things I did when I first came into office, realizing that we were behind times on social media, for example, I created a position called Recruitment and Promotional Strategist. I have an incredibly young, talented person by the name of Stephanie Dalkey. I moved her into that position because I saw her potential. And she has taken off. She's created a Facebook account for the county, a Facebook page for the county executive. We have a YouTube channel now. She's all over social media promoting everything she possibly can. One of the things I found odd is with the county Walleye Weekend, I had never seen the county promote it. I've never seen anything when we went through as a county and put it on social media or did other things that were out there for it. And now the idea is I want Ripon to know what's going on in Campbellsport. I want my Calvary to know what's going on in Waupun. And so now what Stephanie does is she reaches out to not only the agencies or governmental bodies there, but private organizations. If you've got an event going on, let me know. And she will promote it throughout the entire county. And we send it. I can't tell you what a change has been. I've gone to different areas now, talked to people, say, yeah, I was over at this event down by Waupun today. I didn't even know about it for it. And I saw it on social media. That's what we're trying to do, is make people aware that there is life outside the community you live in. So start driving around, start checking it out, start looking at our park system that we have here for it. Take the kids out and do something. There's things here to do. You don't have to leave the county for this with it. So that's what we're trying to create. And by doing that, our hope is we can create an atmosphere of families that want to stay and families that want to move into the county with it, because that's what we have to do. I can tell people all the time, I can promote business, but it's hard for me to go through and promote them to move in if there's not a labor force for them with it. Because that's what they're going to ask me. What's your labor force like? And if we're struggling, they're going to go somewhere else. And my fear is if we don't do something now to try and increase the number of individuals we have for our labor force, my fear is in the long run we're going to see companies leave Fond du Lac County and head south, where actually the labor force is growing down there. So that's what we have to figure out, is how do we retain our existing companies for it. So some things, not only that, but we have different projects that are part of the future, and it's part of my process of preservation of the county. I talked about the golf course. The fairgrounds is the next one. We have a beautiful fairgrounds buildings there in Complex. The fair is held there every year, but we need to update a lot of those. There's a stage project that's going on right now that we've been working on, but unfortunately the bids that have come in a lot higher than we anticipated with regard to that, but I haven't given up hope. I've gone through, I've worked with individuals involved. We're now going to make cuts to the design, which is going to substantially reduce the price down. If we can get a functional stage out there to start, at least, that's a better option for us than what's existing out there right now for it. But that doesn't solve the problem. As I tell Craig, our parks manager, our buildings are falling apart at the fairgrounds. If you take a look at our buildings and walk around them, you'll see sections that are falling down. Siding, areas that need to be repaired, wood that's rotting for it. We have to preserve those buildings. And I said, if you go through, and if you want to preserve your fairgrounds, you need to spend the money. You can't focus just on the stage. But I guarantee if you go to the fairgrounds on a beautiful stage and they see the other building, they're going to remember the other buildings, is what they're going to remember. So we need to go through and figure out ways to increase our revenue ability to start making renovations to the fairgrounds. We got a grandstand out there that needs to work, with buildings out there, the expo center itself needs some repairs done, but we have to invest in this to get it done. So how do we get the money? That's when we started a conversation with regard to a new process of naming rights. The discussion came up when it came to the stage. Alan, my predecessor, has gone through, and there was a conversation going on with one company that was willing to donate $250,000 to naming rights for the stage itself. That was where the conversation started then. I took it further, started talking to that company, and they said yes. As I started talking to other companies that are based here in Fond du Lac, they said we'd be more than willing to look at that. That's a great way to commit, to show putting our name, our corporate name on something, to show that continued partnership. So we started to explore that option. I talked to the finance committee about that. We started talking to the parks committee in regard to that. Is there potential for this? It was always the conversation of the fairgrounds. That was always the conversation. Do we want to create a policy relevant to naming rights to draw revenue with regard to our fairgrounds? The finance committee felt that we would need to think bigger. We need to now look at countywide instead of just the fairgrounds, because we have different projects out there that need revenue to get it done. A good example, the golf course. If we're going to do the clubhouse, that's going to need money to get it done. And the reality is we're probably not going to have enough money to get it done as fast as we'd like to get it done. So that's a possibility with it. But the problem became, the approach in my head that bothered me was are we subbing the county? That's the part I did not care for. And that's why the discussion took a while, because I had to figure out how can I get around this field with regard to that we're doing that. And when I started looking at policies in other counties, I was surprised how many counties actually do it, including Washington County for it. But I had to figure out a way to do this. I was not in favor of a donation process to do that. We have a donation policy that we did not have before that I wrote that the county board passed, because I was very adamant that I did not want donations coming in from private individuals and groups that the public wasn't aware about. Again, transparency. So now they're required to report any donation that they receive has to go through a process in which it's reported. It has to go to our finance committee for approval. If it reaches over $20,000, it has to go to county board for approval. If it gets rejected, it's rejected. But there's transparency. Those records are subject to open records. They're kept in our finance department now in one centralized location. So anyone at any time now can request those records so they can see who is donating money to it. Because that was important to me to make sure that we had that transparency so people knew what was going on for it. But the naming rights issue, I did not want to get to a point that we were saying, well, give us the amount of money, have whatever you want. Or companies approaching us and I'll give you X amount for naming rights for this. I did not want that. I was concerned of a transparency issue with some of that. I felt very strongly that this approach had to be something that was limited to projects we were working on, not selling off any name we wanted to any building we had. So the approach would be, if we've got a project going on, such as a stage, for example, the idea would be we do a bid system. By doing a bid system, you create transparency by making sure that the public knows who submitted bids with it. And what I did, that resolution and policy went to the county board yesterday and it passed for it. But the idea is, by doing it this way, what's happening now, I will now take a project that we're working on. We'll calculate out what it's going to cost for that renovation to be done. We'll then make a determination of how much money the county actually has available for that project. When we run the numbers, that will now tell us what we need for a minimum bid for naming rights on the item. That then will go out for a request for proposals. This way, all those RFPs are always public, so people can see them. They will go out, bids come in, that is also public, so people can see them. We go through, we receive the bids for something. I then look at them. I have criteria that I've set in the policy as to it can't pertain to different items. To items that are derogatory, racist, political parties are not even allowed with regard to it. And so what I had to do was, as long as it meets that criteria for it, I was okay. The safeguard of any county executive after me saying, well, we're just gonna accept it, is that I put in there, the county board has to approve it. There has to be a checks and balance system between this. So no power, not one side has the authority just to unilaterally go ahead and do this. So now the county board has oversight also with regard to those bids. They have the ability to go through and say we accept, reject, or they can look at the other bids that we've received. And they have the ability to go through and entertain the idea of a different one by a different name if they wish to. Of course, the offset to that is the county executive has veto authority also. So if they do something, now the county executive has the ability to veto that action too. So it's a constant checks and balance system between the two branches of government that I think has to be maintained at all times for it, so that one body does not have too much power in its hand at one time for it. So that is the policy that's now in place. We are now going to be proceeding with regard to the state project, for example, we're looking at for it, and then we're going to start looking at the fairgrounds. I can tell you I've had different companies approach me about the idea of when we're going to open up buildings to the fairgrounds for bidding with it. I have a few companies that are very interested in naming rights to some of the buildings that are relevant to the nature of their business for it. But one of the things I did in the policy was I made sure I did not want out-of-county companies to have no relationship with us to come in and just start bidding. So one of the rules I imposed into the policy, that company must do substantial business in the county for it. Because to me, the nature of this is a partnership. It's a partnership between our existing businesses and the county. And what better way to go through and ask, for example, Mercury, who's been a main part of our county, to now have a name on one of our buildings, or Grande Cheese, or somebody else for it. And that's where we are moving forward with this as a way to draw revenue to do that. Because the reality is, we don't have enough money. We don't have enough money for what's going on, and we get back to our budget. Now, last year alone, we went on through, and when I looked at the budget for 2023, the realization was we did not have enough money to fund everything that was there. I had to make substantial cuts to about $4 million in the budget. We had to go through and postpone projects that had to be done for it. Because we go through and the wages get paid first. That comes right off our levy. We then have to figure out what do we have left to pay for it. Luckily, we have the sales tax, which drove last year about $13 million in revenue for it. Out of that, we spent about $9 million on projects, including after I made the cuts, we still had to use sales tax money to pay for some of the operational expenses because we were still short. But I would not go through as a policy with regard to my budget practices. I will not spend all of the surplus sales tax money because I believe very strongly that to have strong government, you need a surplus remaining to always protect yourself in the event of bad times, if something unforeseen happens. So what I've done, when we went through this last budget, $13 million, I set aside right away $3 million of that. I've now kept that aside into a different account. I shifted surplus monies from before into another account, and I have probably at this point anywhere from $8 to $10 million now sitting there as a surplus to make sure that I always have the county protected in the event of an emergency for it. Now we just go forward to figure out how we fund the rest of the projects. I've been pushing on the legislature. I've had a conversation with the governor at one point. I talked to some of our state legislators with regard to increasing the share of revenue. We have to increase money for Madison to county government because it's not only the county, our local municipalities are suffering right now. As a former town board member, I can tell you how many projects we could not get done because roads cost us a fortune for it. And that is one of the biggest expenses any municipality will have is roads expenses for it. But now that I'm not on a town board, I tease the chairman, who's a dear friend of mine, that I'm sick and tired of the dip in front of my house because one of their culverts is collapsing. And so I tease him all the time about that. When are you going to get it done? When are you going to get it done? He said, stop calling. I said, well, now I want you to know how it felt like when I was getting these calls for it. So, but these are projects that have to get done. And we try and help out as a county. One of the things we did, which I'm very proud of what we did, is we took, when I was on the county board, we took the sales tax money itself and we dedicated $1 million of our sales tax money as municipal aid now. And so part of that money goes to every municipality now to help them out on any project they might have It's unrestricted. All they have to do is basically go through, tell us how to use it. We have no oversight though. But it's theirs to use and to provide some type of assistance. If we have the ability to increase that number, I will. Because I know that those municipalities also suffer. Because not only do they have infrastructure issues, they have personnel issues. They have the same problem with wages that we have for it. And we need to find some way to keep partnering with those municipalities to try and make sure they're completely funded and operating. Law enforcement is probably a good example. There's one municipality right now that's about to close their law enforcement office to give up their police department because they cannot staff it. They're struggling right now just to get police officers because they are short statewide. So now they're looking to contract with the county to hire another deputy to go through and have that deputy patrol that area itself. And because that's the reality where we're at, I think that is where the future is, that a lot of municipalities will be forced into that situation where they're going to have to contract out law enforcement because they cannot get people to come work for them with it. So I think the city of Fond du Lac alone, I think, is down, last number I saw was about 13 officers right now in the city of Fond du Lac itself. We are fortunate that our sheriff's department, though, we are not down deputies. We are blessed to have a wonderful sheriff. We have a strong sheriff's department. And one of the things that I love about our sheriff's department and we love about Fond du Lac County is we stand behind our law enforcement. We have been very strong advocates for them throughout the county, our law enforcement agencies. And as one officer came from Sheboygan County to join Fond du Lac County, I remember the sheriff telling me, he asked him why. He said, because I keep hearing how wonderful your county government and your municipalities support you guys with it. And that's where the feeling was. And we have a great reputation out there with regard to our backing of our men and women in blue. So that has been a fantastic support we've had from them and something that I've been very clear that we need to go through and support them. Then when we talk about operational expenses, that is one of the biggest areas that we're seeing right now. The drug issue is massive. I see the reports that come through from the sheriff's department usually every day now. And we go through, and every single one I'm seeing has some connection somehow to drugs. It amazes me. The amount of drug busts that have been happening right now. The most recent one I saw, they went through, they made the drug bust, and now the connections, the direct connections to the Mexican cartel for it. They're housing, they're shipping right from the border. They're storing, I was told now, up in the Fox cities in different places. And that's what's happening. It's become, I think in the last few weeks, it's probably been 3 or 4 of them here in Fond du Lac County. And it's one of the things that we have to face the reality of is that we have to give our officers the tools they need to stay one step ahead with that. Because this is a growing problem right now. I know sadly enough you had the incident here in Ripon with regard to the young man that just passed away here. It's just ideas that these drug-related matters that go on, we have to find answers to this problem. And it's not just a law enforcement issue, it's actually a matter of we have to find treatment availability. Ways to go through and find a way to cut into the problem by giving them available avenues of treatment and support them with regard to that. You know, law enforcement can't always be the answer. You have to get to the core problem of why are they using it in the first place. And if they're addicted, what do we do to go through and help them beat that addiction for it? And so those are things we have to work on with them in law enforcement for DCP, DSS, to figure out what can we do now to solve this. Our priority to me has been trying to get into the high schools, try and go through DSS with families that obviously have children that are having drug issues, and try and get to the heart of those problems itself to help out with that for it. So there's a lot going on with regard to the county, and there's a lot of different changes that have to be made itself, and we have to move different things through and change things, you know, if we want to have successful government for the next 15, 20 years. But again, it's going to take money, it's going to take support, it's going to take staff to get this all done for it. And so it's been a great honor serving as county executive so far in this position. You know, I have a great staff that I work with up there on the 4th floor, and all my department heads are very dedicated servants to Fond du Lac County, and I'm very proud of everything they do with it. And I said the relationship we have with the county board has been a fantastic team effort that we've had. And again, I think we're a good example for other counties to be looking at with it. So I want to thank you for your time. I'm going to give everybody a chance to ask some questions too. Yes. Yeah.
So if Ripon were to come up with a housing plan, because we are crunched for housing,
Yes.
we don't have enough, and we import a great deal of our workforce who would prefer to live here. So if we came up with a plan similar to what Campus Port is doing, in which we are building median cost single-family homes as well as multiple family dwellings, would that be something that you would be interested in supporting?
Yes, in fact, when I talked to the finance committee itself, that's kind of what we're looking for. If we're going to partner with that, that's exactly what we're trying to find. Not the 400,000, not the 500,000 for homes. We're not interested in that. That's not affordability for us. That's the types of partner we're looking at, where the municipalities have skin in that game, and they're putting their substantial resources into it that we can now partner with and say, we're willing to partner. The biggest issue right in the housing, and I'm meeting with Adam soon, in fact, for the city about his project, is infrastructure. That's probably the biggest issue we run into with regard to developers who go through and they say the infrastructure cost, to pay that up front is very difficult for them to do. And because they're trying to fund that money. And one of the things I proposed actually down in the legislature is increasing tax credits for developers to go through and to offset some of those infrastructure costs themselves. But it's going to take that partnership where either the municipalities are buying the land and then it's going through and selling them off to developers at a cheap rate, or doing somewhat similar to what Washington County is doing down there. I'm not totally yet in support of the way they're doing it, but I think it gives at least some ideas for it. But even the infrastructure itself, if we can help partner to offset some of those costs to get that done, we're good with that. We are fine with looking at those ideas, accepting the reality, of course, that we only have so much money. A lot of what has to happen, depending on the cost, might require us to bond to get something done. Or we have about $61 million out in bonding right now. Half of that comes from the highway project, which is about a $33 million project that we did.
What are you doing for bonding years? Are you going out 30 or 40 when you're doing
depends.
infrastructure?
Yeah, it depends what it is. The highway department, for example, we did 10 years and we're going to renew that for it. So there's different ways to try and do it to keep the costs down with regard to it. But I know what's coming down the pipeline now is, of course, is the jail with it. And so we have to be looking at that. And the reality is, if anybody is toward the jail itself, they're going to see, a lot of people don't realize, part of that jail is sinking right now. It's about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch every year that it's sinking. And then so when you take that tour, you'll start seeing, as you walk, part of the floor is lower than the rest. And they have to make adjustments to the doors every year. And it's mainly in the new section that they had built. And it's not really the new section, I have to say. I would say it was 10 years ago or something, maybe 15, they built an addition onto it.
Yeah.
That's the part that's sinking right now for it. And so we're already looking at this as to figure out, what do we do? Part of that jail itself, when you look at it toward it, it's a safety issue also for it. The way when I've been in there seeing videos of what has happened, there's a big concern to me for our officers that are there, jailers, because their system is set up that when one is somewhere, you can't see them. And they have to make sure they've got somebody with them for security. But that's part of the problem we have in the design. And so we have to look at this long-term problem, this issue as a long-term solution. Do we look at a new jail? Do we look at renovating what we have? So we started that discussion already, but it's going to be in the millions to get it done. And that's the reality that we have to figure it out though. But back to housing, yeah, we are more than willing to partner. We're looking at every opportunity. I know I just met with Joe Moore from the city of Fond du Lac, some projects they're working on that I've asked them about, and let them know we're also willing to partner with them to find these types of projects we can work on, because it helps us, but we can't forget, housing is another part of the problem. Childcare is a big issue for us right now, too. So those are things we're also
doing
trying.
pretty good with childcare here.
What's that?
We're doing pretty well with childcare
Yeah.
here, and the Boys and Girls Club will also be assisting
Yes.
with some of those issues.
Absolutely, and yeah. And I'm very fortunate you have the Boys and Girls Club. I was talking to Jason from at one point. The Boys and Girls Club is some fantastic memories I've had from them growing up in Chicago when I played Little League with them. So I'm very supportive. I think it's a fantastic thing we have in this community. And I think it solves a lot of issues for a lot of these kids, too, to give them a place to go with it. So I think it's fantastic they have that going on for it. This one.
What do you do with the old jail?
Well, that's part of what we're looking at, is the idea that if we were to keep that building, there has to be a stabilization to the foundation. That's what we're trying to figure out. At least what I've been told so far, to stabilize just the building, it can be $3 to $5 million just to do that alone for it. And then when you get into the interior, the way it's set up, it's going to be in the millions just to renovate that building inside. So it's part of a feasibility study they're doing right now to figure out what can we do with this building, what can we make use of. What offices could be possibly put over here for it? And if it can't be done financially because of what's happening to it, then it becomes the reality we have to take down part of that building then. Anybody else? Question? Yes, ma'am.
In listening to your presentation, I've made several notes, and one of them is in regards to age distribution. How are you as county executive, or how is your office becoming aware of distribution of ages?
You mean as far as the separation? As far as a higher age group, our older population versus younger, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
And don't use the word versus. That offends me.
Sure, and my apologies. So the comparison, so to give you an idea, the statistics I'm looking at, they're telling me that by 2035, we're gonna have more people over 65 than we are under 18 in Fond du Lac County. So we are trying to prepare two different things. We have to prepare for the older generation, and part of that has to do with housing, for example. When I talk to individuals who are older, they will say, we are looking for senior citizen communities, for example. And so that's part of what we're looking to do, is also trying to develop senior citizen communities where they can move into those communities. And by doing that, they're going to move out of their existing home. That now makes that home available for sale to somebody else for it. So those are the things we're doing. Our social services department and ADRC and different people over there are trying to figure out ways to increase their services for old individuals, because we know those needs are going to have to be met as we move on in the future. But at the same time, we can't ignore the younger generation, because we need them to stay, and we need to now provide things for them to do also. So it's a double-edged sword. We only have so much money, and we're trying to figure out how do we balance it between the older individuals and the younger individuals. So it's just a constant process that we're going through right now with it.
As part of those statistics on age, be aware of, I'll use myself as an example. I'm a third generation resident of a farmhouse. So and we've lived in California and traveled in many other areas. So be aware that there is a returning element of people that went to a local school and are looking forward to returning to our roots. So pay attention to that age category of returnees.
Well, what's happening is interesting you say that, because in our community, Tunnel Pond, for example, we're a big agricultural-based community. There are a lot of farm operations. A lot of those families, though, are selling, because what's happening is their children don't want to farm anymore. They want nothing to do with it. So they are selling off the farm, but they're not dividing the farm into other things. They're finding other farmers that will now buy the land, for example.
Or lease the land.
Or lease the land, correct. Yes, correct. So, but you're right. I would say, it's always saying, the younger generations may leave, but you're right. When they get older, there always tends to be this, they want to move back to their roots, to where they are. And as I jokingly tell my wife all the time, let them go. I don't have to pay for them right now, but they'll come back. At some point, they'll come back.
The other point you mentioned that I responded to was in regards to how you deal with quote unquote farmers. That's a vague definition, and it made me wonder, what's the difference between a quote authentic farmer and a rural residence? And I would use myself and my friend's area behind me as an example.
Well, the traditional farmer to me is the farming operation. It's up. My son, who's 20, is a furrier. He's a cow hoofer. That's what he does for a living. And that it's hard work. He works on a lot of different farms around Fond du Lac County with another gentleman in the business, and he gives me a lot of information because he talks about these farmers. And so when I talk to him, it's always interesting to hear from him what farmers are telling him in regard to their operation. But I define it as a true farmer is one that's engaged in the practice of farming, small or large, with it, from the mega dairies to the smaller organic farmers themselves. The typical farm owner is one to me who just basically owns the farm, but not operating the farm. So I draw a distinction between the two that way.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I guess, like when you had your conversation with the governor, did you kind of bring up, I mean, I get the feeling that urban people don't understand that increasingly the rural parts of the state is where the old people live. I mean, they think of it as a place where, you know, there's these nice bucolic people that, you know, milk cows and raise children and whatnot. But it seems to me increasingly the rural parts of the state are demographically even older than the urban parts.
I think that's probably true. I probably would take offense to older because I live in the country.
I'm one of them.
I get that. And I think, but it's a little different though, is that I think why you see that more in the rural settings, because those are family settings, traditional family settings where it's been handed down from family to family to family. So I think that's been going on. I know in my area of the town of Little Pond, town of Oakfield, all those are generational farmers that have been there for years. And that. So the older individuals, I tend to differ. What I'm seeing is the older individuals from the rural setting, when they're at a certain age, they're actually looking to get into town now, into the cities. Because they're looking for senior services, they're looking for activities with other individuals for it. So I don't think there's really but my conversation with the governor I had was down in Wisconsin Dells at a conference, and we were talking briefly about the budget issue and shared revenue a little bit, and then we started a conversation on different like housing, for example, and I was telling him about the rural setting, as far as where I run into this problem with other people going through and not wanting to develop on these townships because they don't want to give up farmland. And he acknowledged to me, he said, you know, it's just not you, it's statewide. It's what's happening out in the townships, is that they see the battle going on right now between them and cities. And they are doing everything they can in their mind to stop the city from moving in because they're afraid to lose their country setting. And that's what they don't want. And as municipalities exercise extraterritorial rights to expand their city outward, that's where the battles are happening now. The country areas, township areas are fighting back with lawsuits and different things to stop the cities from expanding, because that's exactly what they don't want. They don't want to give up their country living lifestyle out there for it. And I get it. Where I live, I have 3 acres surrounded completely by farmland. My friend owns it by 600 acres out there. And I even said to him, why don't you create a subdivision? No, not doing it for it. But I get it, you know, but they're a generational farmer. You know, grandfather, father, him now, they're gonna pass it down to their son. And they hold all these acres and they won't part with them for projects. It's all farming, that's all they're gonna do with it. Hi, John.
Hi, yeah. Mr. Kaufman, sorry that I'm late. I had a church meeting tonight, but it's good to see you again.
Yes,
We've
you
just
too.
seen each other recently at the opening of the Holy Land Food Pantry, or their open house. And so as you know, I run Broken Bread Food Pantry in downtown Fond du Lac. And so can you speak to what you see as the county's role or support of helping make sure no one falls through the crack in our county? You know, helping the people that are perhaps struggling a little bit more. What do you view or anything that you want to speak of as far as from the county view of things you see happening? And then again, forgive me that I'm late, maybe you talked to this, but my role on city council, I then want to ask, how do you see moving forward some opportunities for the city of Ripon and the county to work together, if you haven't already addressed that?
Sure. And, you know, like I said, the Holy Land Food Pantry was a fantastic project that the county partnered with and donating money from our ARPA fund to go towards that. I'm very supportive of that. We have different organizations out like Salvation Army, for example, even United Way, different groups that I feel as the county we need to be supporting, because they are going through and they are on the ground working with these individuals in need. Like I know when we were at the Holy Land Food Pantry, they were telling me out there, even before they opened, they had people coming looking for help with it. At DSS, we get people constantly, they tell me, over there looking for assistance any way we can for it. So to me, there's an obligation we have to help individuals to go through in those times of trouble they're experiencing. And when municipalities, from my view, go through like Ripon or in your small community, look at trying to develop a project like that, I'm behind it. Because I know they're serving the people on the ground and helping them out for it. And I think we have a duty to do that, to help care for and show that compassion to others that are in need itself. So I'm very supportive of that. So yeah, I know that you do a lot of work with what you do. We've talked about some of that before, and I thank you for your commitment to all that too.
Thank you.
Sure.
And then the
Just one
second
more
part.
question and then we'll
Sure.
wrap it up.
But the second part was, did you already talk about opportunities you see for the city of Ripon to work with the county? Is that something you talked about in your presentation?
We talked a little bit about the housing issue itself, but there's other projects going on that they might have. I'm always willing to listen for it. So, okay. Anybody, one more question? Anybody else?
I have one.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's kind of teeing off, so. I guess my question was, so you talked about the sheriff's department?
Yes.
Law enforcement being strong, there are no holes in that department. You talked about no vacancies in positions. You talked about the jail and the importance of the jail. I guess my question going off of that is, like, poverty drives drug use, poverty drives crime, right? So that's, you know, factual. I would say it's close to factual as you can get. So have we considered doing like a study to analyze how other counties might reallocate money if we're saying like the law enforcement side is really strong, they're all content, there's no vacancies, but what about like the health and human services, social workers? Is there a lot of turnover there that more money could be driven to that side to help eliminate poverty, to help start fixing the drug use problem at the ground level?
Well, I would agree with you to only to a certain extent that poverty causes crime. I believe there is a part of that's true. There's also a part that isn't poverty. It's just individuals that just have that mindset they're going to commit crime itself. So there's a two-part to that. As to the part for the poverty part, I agree with you. There are individuals, for example, who shoplift. Why? Because they don't have the money to pay for food, or they don't have the money to get certain medications, and I get that, you know, for it. So when you talk about money to, for example, DSS, for example, they actually have a surplus. It's not about a short of money. They have a surplus itself most times. And so, for example, we just did a carryover resolution for the county board yesterday. They have a surplus in that department. It's a matter of what programs, though, do we offer? How can we better serve our community with regard to programs? When it comes to the drug issue, that's a DCP matter, Department of Community Programs matter. Jared Vindenhuben, who is our director of DCP, who is going to be the next Human Services Director, she's very strong with regard to programs. So I've been working with her to figure out what are the right addiction programs. I don't want a program, for example, that's going to enable somebody. It has to be a program that they want help. And that's one of the things I've been working with her on. I've been working with Kim Mueller at the Board of Health. We've been trying to figure out programs that if you want, for example, there was a conversation about needle exchanges, for example, for addiction. The view has been, from my perspective, I'm supportive only as long as it involves a treatment program. Just to give somebody a needle for an exchange to me is not the answer. There has to be a component to it where now we're offering. So when they come in, for example, and want that type of service, I want counselors on site. I want them to have an opportunity to sit down with that individual and talk to them. How can we help you? The Salvation Army, for example, has a program that will ship them down if they're willing to go down to Milwaukee for treatment. Those are the things we need to get on the ground so these individuals are there seeing when they walk in the door, this is what they have available. It's just not a matter of trying to help you, give you this needle. Now we're trying to give you a different option now, we'll lay out for it. And that's where you got to give them those opportunities to do that. So we're looking at different programs as we revamp or consolidate the human services model. What can we do? And part of what we have right now, there was a, people heard of this opioid settlement that happened nationwide. So they were sued nationally in the dealer or the manufacturers, the suppliers, and there's two of the parties groups have now settled. The county is participating in that settlement. We are expecting money to be received over a 20-year period. That money has to be dedicated to opioid-related type treatment plans. So now we are working in that process right now where that could possibly be in the millions that we're going to receive. That money will be dedicated to treatment programs. Because it can't be a law enforcement answer all the time. Just arresting them isn't the answer. And I told the sheriff that, and he agrees with me. If you're going to constantly just arrest, it's just going to keep happening. It's a cycle. You've got to get to the fruition. Why, though, are they having the addiction? And we need to provide those treatment plans for them so they know there's a way out. Unfortunately, there's the situation, of course, some people just don't want the help with it. And we've run into that already. When I talked to Jerry at DCP, how many times he's gone through, they've tried to get, and they reject the help. You can't force them, but you want to at least let them know, we're here for you. We're trying to give you that option. DSS, when they deal with families, it's something to do with the children, the different families. If they're spotting a drug issue within the family, they are trying to get them guided back towards DCP to get the help they need. And that's where we need to start funding programs like that. But like I said, presently, you cannot do, because of HIPAA, between DSS and DCP for it. So they have to volunteer. They can't turn from DSS that information over to DCP, for DCP to contact them, unless that person is willing to do it. But if you do a human services model itself, now you have services together that can be offered. And that's what we're trying to consolidate, so I can do things like that, to make that communication better, streamlined, to help those individuals out for it.
So, thank you.
Sure.
I want to thank Sam for speaking with us, because you are frankly a little bit of a mystery to us here at Ripon. So thank you very much, and we had good questions from the
Yes, very much.
audience. So thanks for driving over and speaking with us. It has been filmed, and so other folks will be watching.
Good, and I'm coming before the city council, I think in May, I think so. I know I'm on their calendar to come talk for it too.
Well,
So-
I have to post all of these meetings because
Sure.
3 of us are on the city council.
Sure, yep,
And then we're also on the fire district, so I have to post
sure,
for
I
both.
understand.
In the spirit of
There we
transparency.
go. Well, thank you, everyone, I appreciate it.